These events occurred during a year I moved from Belfast in Ireland to a city in the mainland UK for university. In order to pay the bills, I needed a job, and it just so happened that a guy I worked with back home was in charge of opening a UK branch of a bar chain that started in Ireland in the same city at the exact same time. He sorted me out with a job right away, and I became the de facto supervisor, manager, when he wasn't around solely because I was the first employee hired. Gradually, he hired a handful of Irish students, and the bar, despite the fact that it had no remotely Irish features, became known as an Irish bar. Can't really blame them, as it had an Irish owner, an Irish supervisor manager, and over half the employees were Irish. Myself and two other guys, both English, I'll call them Kevin and Jake, became close and worked the most shifts getting to know the regulars. There were a few creepy, drunken guys or people trying to sneak drugs in the toilets, but nothing worse than what goes on in every bar, club. That was until a certain regular who would usually frequent the place at quiet hours and sit in the many nooks avoiding chit-chat started to make conversation with the workers. Immediately, I understood why he avoided talking to anyone, as he obviously had suffered from some severe trauma to his neck area. He was a slim, unhealthy-looking man in his early 60s with a sunken dent on the right side of his face, and a massive scar running from the corner of his mouth to his temple. His voice was also extremely croaky and deep, and I would have to lean over the counter, putting my ear within centimeters of his mouth, to even sort of hear him. I would end up just smiling and nodding like an idiot, so as to avoid being rude. The only thing I definitely always made out was Belfast, Armagh, another city in Ireland, and Yellow Dog. I felt sorry for him, but I assumed he had suffered throat cancer or something similar, and always humoured him even though he was nearly impossible to hear. I would normally walk the short distance home from work, even though it was through the city centre during the middle of the night. It was nearly always busy, as it was a big student town. I only had one weird experience because of this. When I was stopped by a tall, nervous-looking guy down the one alleyway I had to walk. He asked me for a cigarette, and when I told him I didn't smoke, he noticed my accent and started walking with me and talking about being from Ireland. I was pretty uncomfortable at this point, as it was like 200 yards until I reached the busy high street, where he surely wouldn't try anything, but he kept saying, "My dad's Irish, give me your number and I'll sort you out." Whatever the hell that meant. He kept telling me to get my phone out so I could take his number. It was obvious to me that he just wanted to see if it was worth stealing, so he could mug me. After much insistence that it was okay, he eased off as we neared the high street and said, "I like you, mate. If you ever get in any bother, tell him you're Jameson's cousin." I just mumbled, "Thanks," and figured I was lucky to get out of being mugged. When I mentioned this to Jake, he laughed and told me that I definitely was lucky, as the Jamesons were the main gang in the city. He told me that they were traditionally Irish travellers, but mostly now English, and liked to look after their own. Cool. I was an honorary gang member, I thought, and forgot about it. Months later, we were talking about some of the characters that show up at the bar, and a member of the door staff who was joking around said to me, "I'm surprised you're so friendly with a para." He explained that the scarred regular was a member of the British Army Parachute Para Regiment, and had served in Ireland. I should now explain why I've mentioned Ireland so much thus far. For people that don't know, there has been plenty of death and heartache in Ireland going back hundreds of years. In 1916, it was split into the bottom 26 counties known as the Republic of Ireland, independent, and the top 6 counties became Northern Ireland, controlled by the British government. Belfast, where I'm from, is the capital of Northern Ireland and experienced its worst time from the 1960s to 1990s, known as the Troubles. Nationalists, Republicans, who wanted a full 32-county United Ireland, were at war with Unionists, Loyalists, who wanted to remain under British rule. It resulted in plenty of death and wrongdoing on both sides. During this time, the British government sent in their army, which only served to escalate tensions, and many atrocities were committed by the British army against the nationalist Republican side. As a result, there is massive dislike and mistrust of the British army in this part of the island. Also, people who work in an Irish bar would generally consider themselves nationalist. Not always, but it was true for all the members of staff I worked with. Anyway, sorry if that was too long. I brushed off that bit of info thinking he was a harmless old codger and that I wouldn't let old prejudice get the better of me. The old guy started coming in more and more, always doing the same thing: sit at the bar, order 2 bottles, drink 1, and give the other to whoever served him. Then leave after some 90% inaudible chat. I then began to notice he would only ever get a second beer for the English employees. I was being stupid, I told myself. The Troubles were a long time ago, and the majority of people had moved on. But then another Irish employee mentioned it to me. Whatever. Let him hold his prejudice. It was 2013. I wasn't about to let some old secretarian loser get me annoyed. He still talked to me, and I smiled politely and nodded. It wasn't until I started thinking back on it that he was always sneering as he talked to me when he mentioned Ireland. He then began to only talk to Kevin or Jake, both of whom were in the pretty boy mold. Short, slim, good-looking guys in their early 20s, who were chatty and good fun. He would start to stay longer and only talk with them. Often, he would be clearly looking at me and saying stuff, smirking, that I couldn't make him out. When I would ask them what he said, they would just shrug and say, "How the fuck am I meant to know?" and laugh. What really set off alarm bells in my head was when he began to come in for a drink with guys of similar description, and plying them with drinks all night, always young men shorter than him with a slim build. A guy in his 60s buying drinks all night for unassuming young men. I mean, it could be all above board, but it seemed very off to me. My suspicions were confirmed when I was told that while I was back at home for midterm, he had been caught by the bouncers supplying the poor young guy he was in with that night with ecstasy. Hopefully in exchange for just cash, although something told me otherwise. I figured that was the end of it. He'd be in prison, and forgot he even existed until one night I walked home from work about 3 a.m. and swiped my keycard to get into the grounds of my halls. The gate was electric, and took like 5 minutes to slowly close, making it easy for someone without a keycard to sneak in. As I walked the short distance to the actual front door of my halls, I heard quick footsteps and swung around to see the scarred-up, drug-dealing ex-army guy staring right back at me. I was shocked. What the hell am I supposed to do? I was pretty sure I could take him if it came to that, although maybe he would pull some crazy army shit. He just kept staring at me and babbling incoherently. I had no idea what I was supposed to do, and we just stared at each other from a few yards away for what seemed like 20 minutes. Then he began to creep slowly towards me. I wanted to quickly get through the door to my halls, but It was another slow-moving gate, and he could follow me through. I was mentally preparing myself to have to get physical with this guy, when I desperately remembered my run-in with a gang member. "Listen, mate, I'm a cousin of the Jamesons. Do you want me to get them on the phone?" I blurted out. I was pretty anxious in case he said, "Yes, go ahead, and let them come round." But after a few seconds, his face broke out into a familiar, disgusting smirk that kind of said, "I'm almost certain you're bullshitting me, but I'm not about to risk it." He turned and vaulted the now closed gate with unnerving ease. I didn't see him again for the rest of the year, but found out when I returned in September from the bouncer who caught him with the drugs and had been involved with the prosecution that he was now in prison. He was indeed an ex-British Army soldier who had served in South Armagh, a particularly bad area during the Troubles, for a soldier to be based, with the Yellow Dog Parachute Regiment. He was notorious for preying on young students and supplying them with drugs in return for sex. He also had an intense hatred for Irish people. I'm assuming he had some pretty rough times while serving there, and liked to do the rounds of all the Irish bars taunting their staff. As a result of this, he became an enemy of the Jamesons for years. The creepiest thing from all this is that on thinking back, I'm pretty sure that he was saying some pretty racist, xenophobic things to me every chance he got, but I just nodded like an idiot because I didn't want to be rude. I shudder to think what he was actually saying to Kevin or Jake. So creepy, scarred-up, ex-army, drug-dealing, Ireland-hating sex predator guy. Let's not meet again. But slightly less creepy Jameson gang member. I suppose I owe you a beer. Johnny's Pizzeria is a half block from my house, and Wednesday night is cheapo pizza night. I live alone in an okay neighborhood a few miles outside of a rough but improving city. On many a Wednesday, and then Thursday and Friday, I have some pizza. I usually walk to get the pizza, but it was raining this night, so I drove the half block. The only patron in sight, 5'7", dark hair, slight build, American Psycho's Patrick Bateman, without Christian Bale's build or looks. Or personality, I reckoned, as I watched him awkwardly engage an employee. He asked him if he had seen Hateful Eight, with the break in the middle. He asked him a few times about the break, but never using the word intermission, and the employee looked a bit confused. The guy behind the counter said he saw it on a website with no intermission. I thought maybe Mr. Bateman was an old friend of the employee. He said he was moving to LA in June to pursue a career in stand-up. Based on the counter guy's lack of reaction, I didn't think he knew him. I was bemused, but avoided eye contact with Bateman. My desire was for cheese, pepperoni, mushroom, red sauce, and dough, without the crazy. Bateman then bought a $1.63 cookie, and the woman at the till rang him out and told me my pizza was finishing up in the oven. So I sat at the booth nearest the counter, and Law & Order's theme song and title credits blurted out on the sole large TV in the place. Cookie in hand, Bateman sidled up to my booth and said, "You know, these special crime unit cases, they're all anal crimes. Like crimes involving people getting anally raped." I was aghast. Fuck. Is this guy's idea of a stand-up routine? It needs some work. "Yeah, well, it's the holiest of holes, I guess," I blurted out. In retrospect, I wonder if he got the Tarantino reference. I saw the mental illness in his eyes. Bateman sat, uninvited, at the narrow booth. Our knees knocked. He offered me some of his cookie. No, sir, thank you. I don't want any of your cookie. You bought it. It's yours. I wanted my pizza, goddammit, not a cookie. Bateman stands up and says, "Don't be such a creep. You don't want any of my cookie? That's fine." He then awkwardly staggers around the room, looking for anyone else to engage. The staff are busying themselves. I am his only victim. "So, what is your favorite band?" "Sir, don't take it personally, but I just don't want to talk to you." He hovered around the joint, pacing around. Standing in front of the exit, I thought he was going to stand there to be an obstacle after my food was done, then moving when another patron came in. Apparently Mr. Bateman ordered a chicken taco, and it arrived. Thankfully he left to eat it. I kept an eye on the ovens and the parking lot to see where he went to. When my pizza was done, I asked a woman at the till whether she knew him, and told her I was disturbed by my interaction with him. She said no, but said that earlier a man had come in, ate the sugar packets, and bummed a slice from a family eating there. Typical junkie behavior. I said it must be a full moon, and thanked her. I saw that he was at the edge of the parking lot, looking out toward the road, far enough away that I could safely get in my car. I did, and pulled out, and saw him staggering up the sidewalk toward my house. He was looking at the houses along the way when I passed him. He spun around to look at my car. I drove around the block and realized, because I was only going to be out for 5 minutes, and I'd be coming back home with a pizza box in hand, I didn't lock the front door, and I had left my phone at home. When I came back around the block, he was still on the sidewalk near my house. It was raining out. Mr. Bateman was, to all appearances, mentally ill. What if he was looking at the houses to seek shelter? What if he was trying the doors to get in? I went to my cousin's and called the non-emergency line for the police, and gave a description of the man, and asked that they come to my house to make sure it's secure. The dispatcher said at the end of the call, 2 things. 1, always lock your door, even if you're just going to Johnny's. 2, I hope you got the breadsticks, 'cause they're great. I told the officers what happened, and suggested that if he's still in the neighborhood, this might not be the last call they get tonight about him. I'd rather have a torn ego and an intact cornhole than a torn cornhole and an intact ego. What if it hadn't been raining that night, and I had walked? Anal Mr. Bateman? Let's not meet. So about a year ago, I was hanging out with my friend Brandon at a park near where he lived around 11:30 at night. We were on one of the dark, winding paths leading into a huge wooded area near his house. We'd sat here in this spot so many times before over the years. We were sitting on a bench that's maybe 300 to 400 yards from the park's open, more public area. Looking at the bench from the trail, I was on the left, closer to the forest, and Brandon on the right, closer to the park. The bench is right next to the trail, like a foot away, and on either side of the trail is decently dense forest, aside from the little bit cut out to fit a bench. It was a summer in Texas, and I felt warm and safe, since I'd been here so many times before. But also because Brandon is a 6-foot-tall guy and I'm a closer to 5-feet-tall girl. We'd been at the park for hours, sitting on the bench, smoking and talking. We had a whole setup of our stuff sitting in between us. 2 pipes, 2 grinders, 2 lighters, 2 backpacks, and other miscellaneous items. I mostly just mean to point out that we were very comfortable where we were, and we had been lounged out in this area for hours, with a lot of personal items lying out. Brandon and I are both significantly baked. At this point in time, I started to discuss with him that I was dealing with some unknown health issues and that my doctors were monitoring my heart rate and had hounded me about keeping it significantly under 140. The atmosphere was steady and calm. As Brandon went to reply, suddenly, we heard a man's very loud, very deep voice. My heart stopped. The air felt so still, and Brandon and I looked at each other, and I felt my heart drop right out of my chest, because the look of fear on his face mirrored mine. The voice of the man wasn't just any level speaking voice. He was yelling a song or a chant. At the point that he began this melodic yelling, we could tell that he was within 50 feet of us, and as Brandon and I turned to where the voice was coming from the right, closer to me, just down the trail deeper into the forest, a figure comes into view. He's about 50 feet away, and all I can see is that he's wearing a white shirt and is closing in on us quickly. Brandon and I turn to each other once more, and he says in a hushed but urgent tone, "We have to go." My body went cold. This whole moment lasted maybe 3 seconds, from the beginning of the chanting to Brandon declaring that we needed to leave. I grabbed everything of mine, not at all concerned with preserving my bud, and shoved it into my bag. I stood up and tried to begin walking as swiftly as possible. All the while this guy is still chanting and running. Brandon stops me as he doesn't have all of his things back into his bag. The 2 seconds it took him to grab his things felt like minutes. I could see this guy clearly coming towards us, and as soon as Brandon got up, we sprinted with all our power towards the open area of the park. Because of my health issues at the time, I was sluggish and fatigued. I sprinted with all the force in my body, falling behind Brandon. The further I fall behind him, the louder the footsteps behind me become. I can feel this person closing in. I can sense that they are within 15 feet of me. My heart is pounding, and adrenaline makes me feel as if cold blood is pumping through my veins. All I could do is push and try my best to keep up with Brandon, who was clearly trying to hold up so I could catch up, but also obviously didn't want to face whatever was just feet behind us. We never looked back. We ran through the woods, then the park. But still, even as we reached the neighborhood's main road, we could hear his shoes slapping against the pavement just behind us. We continued across the road and into another forest, where we ran until we couldn't. We were pretty sure the guy stopped just at the edge of the main road we crossed, but we ran until we were sure he wouldn't find us again. At this point, we found a new bench to sit at, and just tried to rationalize what had just happened. I called my mom to pick me up on our walk back to Brandon's, that we only took once we felt we were safe and unseen. I'm still not totally sure what happened, or what was about to happen. We sometimes joke about this man running after us, yelling some earthy song with words of another language. But we both know what happened that night was horrifying and inexplicable. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to episode 56. Okay, let me think. What's the game plan for the week here? Tuesday I haven't decided on yet. Something will be up though, so don't fear. Something will be up. Wednesday will be another True Scary Stories. Thursday, I believe currently that's collaboration with Mortis Media. And Friday should be Paranormal Stories, with Saturday is still open as well. Plenty of things to choose from though, so I should have something interesting up for us all to enjoy. I'm probably going to record a couple of days together at one point this week, just so I can clear off 2 days because I've got a little, decorating to do around the house. time my living room got redone because, well, it's not very nice right now. I don't like it. That's nothing to do with True Scary Stories, but it is one of the things I plan to get done while I'm off these next 2 weeks. Okay, so, until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.